Caucasus hunter-gatherers and the Yamnaya culture. But before we get too deep into the video, first I want to tell you guys about my social media platforms. So I have a Clubhouse account and we can actually talk to one another on it. I also host Clubhouse rooms every now and then where I might talk about history and genetics of the Middle East and Africa. I have a Twitter page, a Facebook account, and a Facebook page, as well as a Instagram, all titled The Hebrew of Israel. And what I typically do on these platforms is post upcoming videos as well as slides for my presentations. And so just be on the lookout for all of that on my social media platforms. And if you want to support me financially for the channel, you can look at my Patreon as well as my PayPal and my GoFundMe. And with all of that out of the way, let's begin with the video. Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry contributed to an ancient population of people known as the Yamnaya culture. So let's learn about the relationship between Caucasus hunter-gatherers and the Yamnaya culture. Because remember, we know Caucasus hunter-gatherers were an early human population with haplogroup J. Therefore, knowing who they interacted with and mixed with could give us an understanding and idea of who early haplogroup J males were from an genetic and even linguistic level. So, Jones at 2015 analyzed genomes from males from western Georgia in the Caucasus from the late Upper Paleolithic, 13,300 years ago, and the Mesolithic, 9,700 years ago. These two males carried Y DNA haplogroup J star and J2A, later refined to J1-Y6305 star and J2-Y12379 star, and mitochondrial haplogroups of K3 and H13C, respectively. The researchers found that these Caucasus hunters were probably the source of the Near Eastern DNA in the Yamnaya. At the beginning of the Neolithicum at circa 8000 BC, they were probably distributed across western Iran and the Caucasus, and people similar to northern Caucasus and Iranian plateau hunter-gatherers arrived before 6000 BCE in Pakistan and northwest India. Eastern hunter-gatherers from the Pontic-Caspian steppes have received admixture from Caucasus hunter-gatherers, leading to the formation of Western steppe herders, WSH. Western steppe herders formed the Yamnaya culture and expanded massively throughout Europe during the late Neolithic and early Bronze Age. So, the Satsuma individual is genetically closest to an ancient individual dating to around 9700 BP, found at the Katos Clade rock shelter in Georgia. Together, they form a genetically distinct cluster referred to as Caucasus hunter-gatherers. In comparison to modern human populations, the Satsuma individual is closest to modern populations from the South Caucasus. The Caucasus hunter-gatherers contributed significantly to modern European populations by way of the Yamnaya people. Around half of the Yamnaya people's DNA comes from the Caucasus hunter-gatherers. The Caucasus hunter-gatherers also contributed genetically to modern Central Asians and South Asians. The Proto-Indo-Europeans, i.e. the Yamnaya people, and the related cultures seem to have been a mixture of Eastern European hunter-gatherers, EHGs, and people related to the Near East, either Caucasus hunter-gatherers or Iranian Chalcolithic people, with a Caucasian hunter-gatherer component. Each of those two populations contributed about half the Yamnaya DNA. According to Jones et 2015, Caucasus hunter-gatherers' genomes significantly contributed to the Yamnaya steppe herders, who migrated into Europe 3000 BCE, supporting a formative Caucasus influence on this important early Bronze Age culture. Caucasus hunter-gatherers left their imprint on modern populations from the Caucasus and also Central and South Asia, possibly marking the arrival of Indo-Aryan languages. Beyond contributing to the population of mainland Europe through Bronze Age pastoralists of the Yamnaya, Caucasus hunter-gatherer also appears to have arrived on its own in the Aegean without Eastern European hunter-gatherer ancestry and provided approximately 9 through 32% of ancestry to the Minoans. The origin of the Caucasus hunter-gatherer component might have been this Caucasus hunter-gatherer component might have been Central Anatolian. So we're going to read from this paper. Upper Paleolithic genomes reveal deep roots of modern Eurasians, and it says, we extend the scope of European paleogenomics by sequencing the genomes of late Upper Paleolithic and Mesolithic males from western Georgia and the Caucasus and a late Upper Paleolithic male from Switzerland. While we detect late Paleolithic Mesolithic genomic continuity in both regions, we find that Caucasus hunter-gatherers belong to a distinct ancient clade that split from Western hunter-gatherers 45,000 years ago, shortly after the expansion of autotomically modern humans into Europe and from the ancestors of Neolithic farmers 25,000 years ago around the last glacial maximum. Caucasus hunter-gatherer genomes significantly contributed to the Yamnaya steppe herders who migrated into Europe 3000 BC, supporting a formative Caucasus influence on this important early Bronze Age culture. Caucasus hunter-gatherer left their imprint on modern populations from the Caucasus and also Central and South Asian, possibly marking the arrival of Indo-Aryan languages. Western hunter-gatherers and Caucasus hunter-gatherers are the descendants of two ancient populations that appear to have persisted in Europe since the mid-Upper Paleolithic and survived the LGM separately. So here is the LGM, meaning last glacial maximum. So here is a map showing, or a chart showing, Caucasus hunter-gatherers, European farmers, and Western hunter-gatherers. They have a common source. So in a sense, you can almost say Caucasus hunter-gatherers and Western hunter-gatherers are brothers or cousins in a sense. Here's a closer image. The relationship between Caucasus hunter-gatherers, Western hunter-gatherers, and early farmers. So, Caucasus hunter-gatherer origins of migrating early Bronze Age herders. So, we find that Caucasus hunter-gatherer, or a population close to them, contributed to the genetic makeup of individuals from the Yamnaya culture, which have been implemented as specters for the profound influx of Pontic steppe ancestry that spread westwards into Europe and east into Central Asia, with metallurgy, horse herding, and probably Indo-European languages in the 3rd millennium BC. Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry in these groups is supported by admixture analysis and admixture statistics, which best describe the Yamnaya as a mixture of Caucasus hunter-gatherer and Eastern European hunter-gatherers. So here's a chart showing that. Basically, as they said, the Yamnaya people are a mixture of Caucasus hunter-gatherers, as you can see right here, and Eastern hunter-gatherers, or Eastern European hunter-gatherers. That's what makes the Yamnaya. As you can see right here, there is a split in between those two. And on this chart, you can see it as well. But this actually shows you like from an autosomal perspective, which is pretty good. During the early Bronze Age, the Caucasus was in communication with the steppe, particularly via the Maya-Cope culture, which emerged in the first half of the 4th millennium BC. The Maya-Cope culture predated and possibly with early southern influences contributed to the formation of the adjacent Yamnaya culture that emerged further to the north and may be a candidate for the transmission of Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry. In the admixture analysis of later ancient genomes, the Caucasus component gives a marker for the extension of Yamnaya admixture, with substantial contribution to both Western and Eastern Bronze Age samples. The separation between Caucasus hunter-gatherer and both early farmers and Western hunter-gatherers ended during the early Bronze Age when a major ancestral component linked to Caucasus hunter-gatherer was carried west by migrating herders from the Eurasian steppe. The foundation group for this systemic change was the Yamnaya, who we estimate to owe half of their ancestry to Caucasus hunter-gatherer linked sources. These sources may be linked to the Maya-Cope culture, which predated the Yamnaya and was located further south, closer to the southern Caucasus. Though through the Yamnaya, the Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestral strand contributed to most modern European populations, especially in the northern part of the continent. Finally, we found that Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry was also carried east to become a major contributor to the ancestral North Indian component found in the Indian subcontinent. Exactly when the eastward movement occurred is unknown, but it is likely included migration around the same time as their contribution to the Western European gene pool and may be linked to the spread of Indo-European languages. The discovery of Caucasus hunter-gatherer as a fourth ancestral component of the European gene pool underscores the importance of a dense geographical sampling of human paleogenomes, especially among diverse geographical regions. Its separation from other European ancestral strands ended dramatically with the extensive population. Linguistic and technological upheavals of the early Bronze Age results in a wide impact of this ancestral strand on contemporary populations stretching from the Atlantic to Central and South Asia. So what have we learned so far? Caucasus hunter-gatherers descend from an ancient population in Europe. Caucasus hunter-gatherers are cousins to Western hunter-gatherers. Caucasus hunter-gatherers contributed half of their ancestry to the Yamnaya culture, and the Yamnaya culture are Proto-Indo-Europeans. Therefore, Caucasus hunter-gatherers contributed to the ancestry of Indo-Europeans. Modern Europeans actually get their light skin thanks to Caucasus hunter-gatherers because the Yamnaya, Proto-Indo-Europeans, derive their ancestry from the Caucasus hunter-gatherers. The light skin pigmentation characteristic of modern Europeans is estimated to have spread across Europe in a selective sweep during the Mesolithic. The associated TYRP1 allele CLS2485 and CLC and SLC45A2 emerged around 19,000 years ago during the last glacial maximum and most likely in the Caucasus. The HERC2 variation for blue eyes first appears around 13,000 to 14,000 years ago in Italy and the Caucasus. Caucasus hunter-gatherers contributed to the formation of the Yamnaya culture, whereas Yamnaya samples had up to 43% of Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry. The ancient individual from Serbia was male with black hair and brown eyes. However, the individual is one of the earliest found to carry the derived HERC2 allele for blue eyes. The Serbia individual also likely had light skin, as he was found to carry the derived SLC24A5 allele for light skin. The Serbia individual was also lactose intolerant. The Serbia individual belongs to mtDNA haplogroup K3 and Y-DNA haplogroup J1-Y6313 star. About 1.7 through 2.4% of the Serbia individual's DNA was Neanderthal in origin. Now, returning back to this paper, Upper Paleolithic genomes reveal deep roots of modern Eurasians, and it says, to explore further, we looked at genomes in two pigmentation genes proposed to have been strongly selected in the ancestors of modern Europeans, namely SLC45A2 and SLC24A5. Selected SNPs in the SLC45A2 and SLC24A5 genes contribute to lightening of skin and are also fixed in modern Europeans. We found that Caucasus and Serbia have an ancestral version of the SLC45A2 variant, but both Caucasus hunter-gatherer have the select version of the SLC24A5 gene, encompassed by the most commonly associated haplotype C11 found in modern populations. We found it most likely that Bichon, Caucasus, and Serbia have dark and black hair and brown eyes. So this is from Skin Color and Vitamin D. This is an update dealing with that, and it says, interestingly, Eastern and Scandinavian hunter-gatherers had light skin, in contrast to Baltic hunter-gatherers who kept their dark skin only until 3,800 years ago, when farming was introduced in this region by the Bronze Age expansion of people of the Russian steppe origin, which is the Yamnaya, by the way. These migrants were associated with the Yamnaya culture and emerged out of a mixture between light-skinned Caucasus and Eastern hunter-gatherers. The SNP RS142664 within the SLC24A5 gene has the single largest effect on skin lightening of all gene variants identified to date. It is located within a large 78KB haplotype block C11 shared by virtually all carriers of this allele, including ancient Scandinavian, Eastern, and Caucasus hunter-gatherers, suggesting that this light-skinned variant derives from a single carrier who lived 22,000 through 28,000 years ago in the Middle East. Similarly, haplotype analysis of the SNP RS16891982 of the SLC45A2 gene concluded that this skin lightening mutation occurred only once in the ancestry of Caucasians. So this is very interesting. And here is just a map showing you that Caucasus hunter-gatherers are the ones to really have this lightening of the skin, sort of like the origin point of the light skin. They had the SLC2458 mutation. And as you can see right here, these Caucasus hunter-gatherers contributed half of the DNA to the Yamnaya, who are the ancestors of Proto-Indo-Europeans, and they would have had light skin. And here are actually reconstructions of Proto-Indo-Europeans, or people of the Yamnaya culture, also known as the Kurgan graves. And so this sort of gives you an idea of what the early Yamnaya looked like. So light skin would have expanded with Proto-Indo-Europeans across Eurasia. And when you look at the expansion of the Indo-Europeans from the Yamnaya region, we see that it does perfectly overlap with that of the Indo-European language and the skin tone of lighter skin. So when the Yamnaya Proto-Indo-Europeans expanded, there was various Eurasian Y-DNA haplogroups. One of the major haplogroups was haplogroup R, but haplogroup J would have also been part of this Indo-European migration, considering that the Yamnaya are, Proto-Indo-Europeans derive half of their ancestry from Caucasus hunter-gatherers who had haplogroup J. Therefore, it would make sense that haplogroup J was among Indo-Europeans and possibly even has an Indo-European origin. So this is from EUpedia, titled Yamnaya Culture, 35,000 or 3,500 through 2,500 BCE, under the section Who Were the Yamnaya People Genetically, and it says genetic analysis of the Yamnayan genomes conducted by Allentoff in 2015 and AEC in 2015 revealed that the Yamnayans were a blend of three ancestral populations. The dominant element, 55 to 85%, was the Mesolithic Eastern hunter-gatherers associated with Y haplogroups R1a and R1b. Then came the Caucasian hunter-gatherers admixture, making up about 15 through 25% of their genomes. This admixture is mainly associated with Y haplogroup J, and indeed, one J star sample was found in Mesolithic Russia. It has been confirmed by ancient DNA that J2b was found among Neolithic farmers from eastern Transcaucasia, in this case, northwestern Iran. And there is convincing evidence that these J2b farmers crossed the Caucasus and settled in the Volga-Ural region during the early Neolithic. So let's actually look at these samples. So here's a very old sample of J1 in the Mesolithic age in Russia. And again, it would have been sent there by these groups. And here's a Neolithic sample of J2 in Hungary in Europe. And here's another J2 sample in Neolithic Europe. And there's another J2A sample in Neolithic Europe. And here's a J1 sample in the Chalcolithic age of Turkmenistan, and another J1 sample in Chalcolithic Turkmenistan, and a J2A sample in the Copper age, which means, Copper Chalcolithic age. And here's another one, a J sample in Turkmenistan, Chalcolithic. And here are the various old J samples we find all throughout Europe and all throughout parts of Eurasia. For instance, we found a very old one in France as well. We found one in Mesolithic North Iran, early Neolithic West Iran, Mesolithic Caucasus, Neolithic Anatolia, Lower Austria, which is in Europe, another one in Austria, in Hungary, and so in Hungary, and Copper Age West Iran. So we do find a lot of early old J samples throughout Europe and parts of Eurasia. So it's fairly interesting. And this is why they say, J1 is Anatolian plus Europe. So as I just stated, there are many ancient haplogroup J markers that go as far back as the Neolithic and Mesolithic in parts of Europe. We also find haplogroup J among many Indo-European populations due to the expansion of the Yamnaya, Proto-Indo-Europeans. So here is a map showing the expansion of Proto-Indo-Europeans. And here's a very interesting map showing the Indo-European languages over haplogroup J. And we do see J actually can interestingly fit a lot of Indo-European populations. And this is from EUpedia, the title Haplogroup J1. And it says most J1 Europeans belong to the J1-Z1828 branch, which is also found in Anatolia and the Caucasus, but not in Arabic countries. The Z1842 subclade of Z1828 is the most common variety of J1 in Armenia and Georgia. And this paper is called How Eurasia Was Born, and it says, while early Indo-Europeans who originally crossed from Anatolia in the Bronze Age were most likely represented by various J2 subclades, genetic data suggests that as soon as they reached Central Europe, they assimilated large masses of the native population. And from then on, the rest of their expansion were characterized by more recently formed subclades of the haplogroups characteristic of the native populations. And so here's just a map showing you the expansion of Indo-Europeans, and J being among these early Indo-Europeans. And so here is a map showing the final settlement of the Indo-Europeans in ancient times, and it perfectly fits with Y-DNA haplogroup J. So it's a very interesting overlap that, it's just interesting how much, Indo-European languages and haplogroup J fit one another, specifically haplogroup J2. So what have we learned so far? Caucasus hunter-gatherers descend from an ancient population in Europe. Caucasus hunter-gatherers are cousins to Western hunter-gatherers. Caucasus hunter-gatherers contributed half of their ancestry to the Yamnaya culture, and the Yamnaya culture are Proto-Indo-Europeans. Therefore, Caucasus hunter-gatherers contributed to the ancestry of Indo-Europeans. Most Indo-Europeans actually get their light skin thanks to the Caucasus hunter-gatherers, and because the Caucasus hunter-gatherers, or should I say, because the Yamnaya Proto-Indo-Europeans derive their ancestry from Caucasus hunter-gatherers, light skin would have expanded with Proto-Indo-Europeans across Eurasia. There are many ancient haplogroup J markers that go as far back as the Neolithic and Mesolithic in parts of Europe, and we also find haplogroup J among many Indo-European populations due to the expansion of the Yamnaya Proto-Indo-Europeans. With that being said, I think this map is sort of a good representation of what went on. And, this is basically, Caucasus hunter-gatherers and the Yamnaya culture. With all of that being said, this is where we'll end with Caucasus hunter-gatherers and the Yamnaya culture. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. And if you have any questions, just leave it in the comment section, and subscribe, click the bell, and as I said at the beginning of my video, follow all my socials if you want to get in contact with me. And with all of that out of the way, have a great day and shalom.